My name is Beatrice Holloway, and I have spent 64 years learning that the smallest things you do without thinking are often the ones that end up saving your life. I retired from the Postal Service 11 years ago, after 31 years sorting and delivering mail in a mid-sized city in Ohio. My husband, Robert, passed from a stroke 2 winters after I retired. We had been married 40 years. I won't say much about those first months after he was gone because there aren't really words for it. What I will say is that the silence in the house was the hardest part. Not grief, I had expected, but the silence. The refrigerator humming, the clock in the hallway. The way the porch light he always turned on for me was dark because there was nobody left to turn it on. My daughter lives in Phoenix with her husband and their 2 kids. She called every Sunday. My son is in the Navy and stationed overseas most of the year. They both wanted me to move to Phoenix, to a smaller place, to somewhere with a community center and people my age. I told them I was fine. I told them that so many times I almost believed it myself. About 8 months after Robert passed, the money started getting uncomfortable. Nothing dramatic, just the slow, quiet math of a fixed income meeting a house that was 37 years old. The furnace needed work. The property taxes went up. I was drawing my Social Security and my small postal pension, and it covered things. But there was no margin, no cushion. So when a neighbor mentioned that the new medical office complex 2 miles away was looking for a morning receptionist, just 4 days a week, 6 in the morning until noon, I said yes before I even thought it through. I had never worked a front desk job in my life. But I learned. And more than that, I needed somewhere to go in the mornings. I needed a reason to get dressed. The complex had a parking garage attached, one of those old concrete structures with low ceilings and fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency that made your fillings ache. I parked on the third level every morning. The elevator in the garage was unreliable, so I took the stairs, and every single morning for the first 3 weeks, the same man was at the attendant booth on the ground level when I walked through. His name was Edwin. He was a quiet man, somewhere in his late 50s, with a salt and pepper beard kept very neat and hands that always looked like they were resting even when he was working. He wore the same gray uniform every day, the kind with the company patch on the chest that said Secure Park in block letters. He sat in a little booth with a sliding window, and he had a space heater on the floor because the booth wasn't insulated properly and the Ohio mornings in February were brutal. The first morning I walked through, he nodded. I nodded back. The second morning, same thing. By the third morning I said good morning and asked if he took coffee. He looked at me like I had asked something complicated. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "I do." So the next morning I brought 2 cups from the gas station on my way in. Not fancy coffee, the gas station kind, in the paper cups with the little cardboard sleeves so you don't burn your hand. $2 and change for both. I handed one through the sliding window, and he thanked me with the kind of genuine surprise that told me nobody had done that for him in a while. That was it. That was the whole thing. 2 cups of coffee, 4 mornings a week. I didn't do it because I wanted something. I did it because his booth had no heat, and my mother raised me to notice when people were cold. By April, we had a small routine. I'd bring the coffees and set his on the little shelf of the window. He'd tell me the weather he'd seen on his phone. Sometimes we talked about nothing in particular. His daughter who was studying at Columbus State, my grandchildren in Phoenix, the way the garage's ceiling leaked when it rained. He told me once that he had been working that booth for 6 years and I was the first person who had ever brought him anything. I told him that was a shame and he said, "That's just how it is." He said it without bitterness, which made it sadder somehow. I want to be clear about something. I am a widow living alone and I have learned to be careful. I was kind to Edwin the way I would be kind to anyone, but I kept my life my life. I didn't invite him to my home. I didn't share personal details beyond small talk. My daughter had made me promise after Robert died to be cautious. Not paranoid, cautious. There's a difference. So kindness, yes, but with sense. Things were unremarkable until June. I had been working the desk for about 4 months by then. The office complex handled internal medicine, physical therapy, and a dermatology group on the second floor. The staff was small and mostly young. I liked the work fine, checking patients in, answering phones, managing the appointment system, which they had just switched to a new software I had to learn. It was enough to keep my mind busy, which was the point. There was a man who came in twice a month to service the building's HVAC system. He was a contractor, not a building employee. His name, according to his work orders, was Ray Colson. He was in his mid-40s, stocky, the kind of man who took up more space in a room than his body actually required. He always signed in at my desk, and from the very first time, something about him made me keep my professional face on a little tighter than usual. He was not rude, exactly. He was familiar. There's a difference. He called me sweetheart the first day. I let it go. The second visit, he leaned on my desk and asked me if I lived nearby. I said, I'm not really supposed to chat while I'm at the desk. And he smiled like I had said something funny. The third visit, he asked me what time I got off. I told my supervisor, a young woman named Jess, who was good at her job and took me seriously. She made a note of it and said she would flag it with the building manager. I appreciated that, but I didn't think much more about it. Men like Ray Colson were not a new phenomenon to me. I had worked 31 years in a city postal facility. I knew how to handle unpleasant men. What I did not know, what none of us knew, was that Ray Colson had been using his HVACS to learn the building's layout in ways that had nothing to do with the ventilation system. The first week of July, a Tuesday, I was leaving a little after noon. I had parked on the third level as always, taken the stairs down, walked through the ground level toward Edwin's booth to wave goodbye the way I always did. Edwin's window was closed, which was unusual. He saw me coming and slid it open fast, which was also unusual, and the look on his face was not his normal look. Miss Holloway, he said, can you come around to the side door? I stopped walking. In 64 years, I have developed what I can only call a calibration for when something is wrong. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel like fear exactly. It's more like a frequency shift, like when a sound you've been hearing stops suddenly, and you notice the absence of it. I felt that standing in that garage. I went around to the side door of the booth. Edwin opened it and leaned out. He was speaking quietly. There's a man who came in about 40 minutes ago, he said. Said he had a work order for the building. I logged him in the way I'm supposed to. But he's been sitting in his truck on the second level for 30 minutes without moving. And he paused. When I checked his work order number, it doesn't match anything in the system. I stood very still. He's been here before, Edwin continued. Not with work orders. I've seen his truck. A dark green F-150, same dent on the passenger door. He was here 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, just parked and sat. Did you call security? I asked. I called the building manager, he said. They're on the way. But I wanted to catch you before you went up to your car. Your car is on 3. He's on 2, but. He stopped too, but. He stopped. He stopped. I just thought you should know before you went up alone. My legs felt very steady, which surprised me. I think when something is real, not movie scary, but actually real, your body gets quiet instead of loud. Thank you, I said. Edwin walked me through the booth and out the street side exit himself. He called me a car from his phone, a ride share. Charged to his own account, he insisted, to get me to my daughter's friend's house nearby, where he told me to wait until the building manager called me back. He stood outside the booth watching until the car pulled away. I sat in the back of that ride share, and my hands were shaking for the first time. The building manager called me 45 minutes later. Ray Colson had been detained by the police on the second level of the garage. He had no legitimate work order. What they found in his truck was not something I am going to describe in detail here, but it was enough for the officers to take him in immediately. It came out later, through the investigation and eventually the trial, that he had been watching me for several weeks. My schedule, my car, my level of the garage. Jess's complaint to the building manager had triggered a formal review of his contractor credentials. And what that review turned up had started a separate investigation I hadn't even known about. Ray Colson had a history. He had done this before, in a different city, with a different woman. I do not say this to be dramatic. I say it because I think about it in the ordinary daylight of Tuesday afternoons, and it is still hard to absorb. That's something that banal, a man with a clipboard and a service truck, could be that specific kind of dangerous. The police took my statement. I talked to Jess and the building manager together the next morning. They reviewed the garage footage and confirmed what Edwin had told them. Edwin gave his statement, and he gave it with the same quiet precision he brought to everything. Dates, times, the exact description of the truck, the license plate he had written down because something about that first Saturday had bothered him, and he couldn't say why. I asked him later, when things had settled, how he had remembered to write down the plate. He said, my father always told me, if something makes you look twice, write it down. You probably won't need it, but the one time you do, you'll be glad you have it. He had been carrying that habit for 30 years. The trial was the following spring. Ray Colson's attorney tried to argue that his presence in the garage was incidental, a mix-up with work orders, nothing more. The prosecutor asked Edwin to describe what he had observed over the preceding weeks. Edwin sat in that witness chair in a shirt and tie. I suspect he had pressed himself, and he spoke slowly and clearly and did not embellish a single thing. Just facts. Just what he had seen and when he had seen it. The jury was out for less than a day. I cried in the parking lot of the courthouse afterward, and I am not a woman who cries easily. Not because of the verdict, though I was relieved. I cried because I kept thinking about the morning in February when I'd handed a paper cup of gas station coffee through a sliding window to a man sitting alone in a cold booth, and how from that nothing moment a thread had run forward all the way to this day. There is something I want to say about Edwin that I don't know how to say exactly right. He is not a talkative man. He is not the kind of person who makes an impression in a crowded room. He works a six-level parking garage for a salary I don't know, but can imagine. 4 days a week, 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. He has worked that booth for 7 years now. He is careful and he is consistent, and he notices things. And for 31 years of working near people like him, in mail facilities, in loading docks, in break rooms, I had watched how invisible those people were to the ones walking past. I think about that a lot. I still bring him coffee. I am still working the desk, 3 days a week now instead of 4. I asked to reduce my hours, and Jess accommodated me. Edwin's daughter finished her second year at Columbus State. He mentioned it one morning in the same understated way he mentions everything, and I told him she must be proud of herself, and he said, "I hope so. I'm proud of her." And then the window slid shut because a car was pulling in, and that was that. My daughter called the week after the trial and said she was glad they had caught him, and then she paused and said, "Mom, I think you should move." I told her I was thinking about it. I'm not thinking about it. This is my city. These are my streets, and my garage, and my booth with the space heater and the man who looks twice and writes things down. I am 64 years old, and I know now, if I didn't know it clearly before, that kindness is not weakness. It is not naivety. A cup of coffee cost me $2 and changed my entire life, not because I expected something back. I didn't. I brought it because it was cold and he was there and my mother raised me right. But kindness has a memory, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it remembers you right when you need it most. Be good to the people who are easy to walk past, not because they'll save your life. Maybe they won't, but because they are people, and that has always been reason enough.